Well, good morning, folks, and welcome back to the farm. This morning we got a big morning. Yes, we're going to take the side-by-side down to the sheep pens, to the corrals there that we were fixing last night. And we're going to be sorting. We're going to be sorting and weaning. Who's going to go market? Who's going to stay here? Who's just going to get culled from the flock? So I got my little helper here. You can see she's all dressed right up. It is actually a very autumny day today. I know they say autumn doesn't happen until like later in the year, but the reality is here in northern Alberta, it happened like 2 weeks ago.
It's okay, June.
So all the ones that are going down the road are in the pen there. We had a bit of a disagreement about how we're actually going to do this, but went around the pen, and pretty quickly I realized I was wrong and my wife was right. So we ran them into the alleyway, sorted them in there, into the two pens. Worked fantastic. Everybody's where they need to be. Now these ones we've just got to get on a trailer somehow, and that'll be the next escapade, I guess. So in theory, this next part should be simple, right? We just hook onto the trailer, we go down there, open the door, they all climb in, we haul them back home, and they live happily ever after in their pen. Well, the reality is, once we get up there and we open that door, there's a lot of little ways around and underneath even that could go under the trailer if they really wanted to. So this next part might be a little bit more complicated than what I'm looking forward to. I guess we shall see. Fingers crossed that it goes well. Come on, sweetie. Bring your cane. Let's go get the sheep. There you go.
Oh, stand back, stand back, stand back, stand back, stand back.
So as you probably saw there, when we loaded the sheep up into the trailer, we used our pig ramp that we built last year. We got that design out of Joel Salatin's book, Polyface Designs. And it is heavy duty. Oh my goodness, it's heavy duty. And because we have the electric netting up all the way around the yard, I really had the choice of, do I take all the electric netting down and move the trailer over there and then throw this ramp in the back of the trailer, or do I just pack the ramp to the trailer? So I made the choice to pack the ramp to the trailer. And I mean, this thing needs 9 grown men and a billy goat to move, but it's just me. It's packing this thing. It's heavy, heavy, heavy. Anyways, got it in the trailer and hauled it down there, and it works fantastic for the sheep. One sheep did actually do the old loop-de-loop, and then went back on us and then went somewhere else completely, which was, you know, a bonehead move on her part, but in reality probably saved her life, because I just didn't have an appetite for any more of a rodeo. And we had like 16 sheep on the trailer, and I wasn't willing to sacrifice that for one. So that probably, yeah, like I said, it saved her life. Anyways, I'm going to fire up the old yellow tractor here now. I'm going to go turn over a compost pile in the lambing pen where these lambs are actually going to go for a few days, and then we'll back up and let them free. Now, as I mentioned, I had the electric netting up. So adjacent to the lambing pen, we've put up the electric netting so that they can graze our basically side lawn. And that's one of the things that this year, with such limited pasture availability, we've made pretty much full use, except for a few spots around trees and directly in front of the house. We've made use of the majority of the farmyard actually for grazing space, and just trying to be, I mean, why mow it? Why mow it if you got hungry animals, right? So the last time the majority of these sheep were in this pen was actually when they were born. For the older ones, it was when they were lambing. Some of these are obviously mothers and their children. We got a couple of cull ewes in there, Juliet, Sharon, and Beatrice, that are going to go down the road. So this is going to be like an adventure play park for them with the compost pile. They can run and jump along. They got an old bale there that they can wrestle around with. But I'm actually going to turn them loose into the lawn that I was just talking about next door. Now, again, because most of these are born this year, they've never experienced an electric fence. And this is not just a single strand, this is the netting. And I just touched it just to, you know what, I'm not going to expose the animals to anything I wouldn't do myself. So yeah, she's spicy. So we're going to let them loose, and they can graze quite freely, keep the grass mowed. Well, I'm hiding out in the greenhouse here now just because it's super, super windy. But Carmen and I have spent the majority of our afternoon actually down in the garden harvesting some of our potatoes. And man, oh man, I cannot believe how big and abundant they are this year by comparison to last year. Last year we had tiny little pebbles. It was really seemed like a waste of time and energy. In fact, I think we got less potatoes out of the garden than we put in by way of seed potatoes. So that was pretty heartbreaking. But it was good that we could see it, and good that we could read the soil and say, yes, we know what we need to do here. We made some appropriate amendments by adding peat moss, by adding a lot of compost, by heavy mulching. And so the garden this year has been quite amazing. And all of the waste that comes out of the garden, all the plants that typically would go in the compost pile, we're actually putting them through our pigs. So the pigs are eating all the garden waste, and then they're turning that into rich manure for like a compost catalyst, but they're also turning that into nutrient dense protein by way of homegrown pork, which, I mean, there's just absolutely second to none. And right here in front where we got the electric netting, we got 16 sheep in here grazing on our lawn. Folks, let me tell you, this is exactly what permaculture is about. It's not about segregation. It's about stacking complementary processes on top of each other or adjacent to each other, so that you're able to work together in nature as opposed to having to fight things all the time. So even something like weeds, we pull weeds out of the garden now. You might put that in your compost pile, and then you're concerned, well, does the compost reach the appropriate temperature? Because if it doesn't, then those seeds are in your compost pile that you then spread back on your garden. Well, if you feed those weeds to your pigs, then if any weed seeds come out in the poop that survive that process, they are now part of the catalyst that actually creates the heat in the compost. So it's almost like it increases your chances of success of removing weed growth exponentially. It's actually a fantastic method for removing weeds. Now, we're also talking what we're going to have to do here soon, because we have so much abundance in our garden this year. We're going to have to sell some of our produce, but then we also need a plan to prep those beds for next year already. So that means getting our plastic mulch, laying it out, and then figuring out how we're going to secure that, because it's very, very windy here. This will be our first year where this is going to be a no-till garden. We're using a broad fork just to aerate the garden, and then plastic mulch layer over the bed, and then the organic mulch layer in the rows in between, so it'll be straw or hay or something like that. And I'm really excited, actually. I'm really excited for next year, because I think in the first year that we made amendments to the soil, we saw such a like night and day comparison in growth. I can't imagine what next year is going to look like. Next year, when we probably are going to get rain, we certainly didn't get rain this year. So the evening's coming to a close here now, and you're going to have to forgive me, if you will, if I take this next tale on a bit of a tangent, but something really kind of ground my gears the other day. We were in Edmonton, and we were at IKEA, because as you do, you're going to go all the way to Edmonton, you might as well go to IKEA and buy some, well, I wouldn't even call it furniture, buy some parts, and we'll see about assembling them later. Anyways, IKEA's been known for years for their meatballs, and now they've come up with something called plant balls. Now, I should phrase this by saying that I have no qualms if anybody wants to eat plants, if they want to eat meat, if they want to eat plants that look like meat, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, whatever, you do you. but I really think that the marketing people are pretty sneaky about how they go about this. So we go to IKEA and there's this giant billboard on the side of the building promoting these plant balls and stating that they have 4% of the carbon footprint. Well, you know, as a consumer, I look at that and I think, man, like if I eat these plant balls, you know, I could reduce my carbon footprint of my next meal by 96%. What they don't add context to is that it's 4% of the carbon footprint of the existing meatballs that they already currently sell. Which, by the way, I don't know if I need to tell you this, but if you're buying meatballs from a Swedish furniture store, chances are they're pretty heavily processed and have a pretty high carbon footprint already. So you wouldn't have to do too much. I mean, you could pretty much lick diesel out of a jerry can and have less of a carbon footprint for your next meal than having to buy heavily processed meatballs from a furniture store. Anyways, that was one thing that really got me thinking, you know, how tricky are these marketing people? So now ordinarily, I wouldn't even bat an eye about this stuff, right? But it all comes down to the facts. And what are the facts? What is a fact even? Really, a fact is really just one little piece that makes up a whole truth. And so if there's 10 pieces, you give me 7 facts, but 3 facts are missing. So I lack a whole bunch of context, right? So I have an incomplete truth, essentially. And that's what the marketing folks do. They just give you a whole bunch of stuff that's, although not inaccurate, it is incomplete. But it paints a picture and it takes you down a path that maybe makes you make bad decisions. And so here you are, you've driven all the way to Edmonton and you're like, man, I could change the world with these plant-based meat alternatives. And you see it everywhere. I mean, the ploys now that some of these companies are making, that they're demanding that the meat-based alternatives, which are entirely soy and corn, and you know, they're really not that good for you by comparison. They're demanding that they actually be placed in the meat aisle, which I don't want to even get started on what that means for food safety, because I mean, you don't put raw meat beside your vegetables. You just don't do that. I don't care how much plastic it's wrapped in. That's not the point. But that's an argument for another day, because packaging industry, boy, oh boy, don't get me started there. The packaging industry is where the carbon footprint really comes in that nobody's talking about. Actually, while we're on the subject, it grinds my gears. We had a nice cappuccino from Tim Hortons the other day, and Tim Hortons has got on board with, hey, let's wrap everything in plastic, but give you a toilet paper roll for a straw, which, you know what, does absolutely nothing for the environment. I would be, you know what, hate me if you think, prove me I'm wrong, change my mind, whatever it is. It does nothing for the environment to give me a 20-ounce plastic cup with a paper straw that disintegrates the instant I've got it. It does absolutely nothing but make me despise Tim Hortons or A&W or any one of these other chains that's doing this. There are companies out there right now that are manufacturing entire containers, bottles of water even, out of plant-based plastics that will compost and break down in less than 5 years. Why can't you make straws out of that stuff? Like, talk about a game changer right there. No, let's make it out of toilet paper roll. So you get 2 sips of your milkshake, party's over. Anyways, that's enough. That's enough riling people up for one evening. So I'll let you go for now. I hope you have a fantastic evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.